Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Welcome back to another Yap session. In today's Yap session, I want to focus in on the question of what is the greatest era or decade of football of all time. One of my followers on TikTok a couple days back asked me this in my comment section. They said, Michi, what do you think the greatest decade of football of all time is? And I thought about that question for a really long time. And I was like, you know what? I got a lot to say about this topic. So I'm going to make a Yap session about it. And then hopefully you guys in the comment section can let me know your thoughts about what you think the greatest decade of football is. Let's just get right into the video like always, guys. To me, I don't want to like cop out or give I don't want to not answer the question, but to me, the greatest, or sound corny, I should say. I don't want to sound corny, but to me, the greatest decade of football, the greatest era of football is whichever era or decade you grew up watching it. I mean, if you grew up in the 80s, you're going to say the 80s with Maldini and, not Maldini, sorry, with Platini and Maradona and Van Basten and all these teams and the Maradona teams and the Milan teams and, Argentina winning the World Cup and, all that stuff. If you grew up like me in the 2010s, because I'm 22 years old, I'm going to be biased towards my year in the 2010s. If you ask my grandpa, who's not even alive anymore actually, but if you asked him, if you woke him up from the grave and you said, hey grandpa, what do you think the greatest decade of football is? He'd say the 50s or the 60s or whenever the fuck my grandfather grew up watching football, which actually, I don't even know if he watched football, to be honest with you guys. I never met him, so I couldn't ask him. But anyway, that's besides the point. I don't even know why the fuck I brought that up. But to me, to answer the question, I mean, I kind of already did. To me, the greatest decade of football of all time is the 2010s. And again, like I said, I'm biased because I grew up in the 2010s. And I'm sure that most people watching this video, I mean, you guys are around my age, obviously, because my demographic, or at least according to YouTube analytics, is between the ages of 18 and 24. That's for the majority of my audience, like that's their age range. So obviously, if you're watching this video, you probably grew up watching that era of football as well. And to me, it was the golden period of football. What it really centers around two things. Number one, it was the greatest player rivalry, like two-player rivalry we've ever seen in any sport. And I'm talking about Messi versus Ronaldo. The two GOATs, in my opinion. Obviously, Messi number one, Ronaldo being number two. Messi number one. Don't get it twisted. Messi number one, Ronaldo number two down here. But still, the two GOATs, the two greatest players that I've ever seen. And I think the two greatest players that any of us have ever seen, even if you're fucking 70 years old. I mean, obviously, you can say Pelé and Maradona. But I think in terms of production and just longevity, no one came close to those two guys. And the fact that they battled it out for the whole 2010s and just went blow for blow like two heavyweights. I mean, Ballon d'Or. UCL, the other one won the UCL. One won the Golden Boot, the next year the other guy won the Golden Boot. I mean, just trading off awards and trading off insane performances and facing off against each other twice a year at least, because they both also played for the two biggest clubs in the world, the two greatest clubs and the two clubs with the greatest rivalry, in any sport. It was kind of like Bird and Magic in the NBA with the Lakers and the Celtics, except the difference is Bird and Magic aren't in the GOAT discussion. Ronaldo and Messi are literally the GOATs. They are literally the two greatest players that any of us are ever going to see. And sorry, someone's calling me. I don't know who this is. Yeah, I'm making a Yap session. Shut the fuck up. They're literally the two greatest players any of us are ever going to see. And they just happen to coincide and play for the two biggest clubs in the world. You know what I'm saying? And even in basketball with like the Lakers and the Celtics, it's not the same tribalism as in football. I mean, the Lakers and Celtics play today, no one gives a fuck. You know what I mean? It's not like there's no ultras, there's nothing like that. In European football, I mean, Barca and Real Madrid could literally be 10th and 11th in the table, and it would still be the biggest game of the year. It was also like two of the best teams we've ever seen. Barca with Pep Guardiola, and then those Madrid teams with Jose Mourinho, and also the Pep Guardiola and Jose Mourinho rivalry that came, like them going against each other, and also the fact that fucking later on in that decade, Real Madrid had one of the greatest runs in the history of football, winning 3 straight UCLs and winning 4 out of 5 UCLs. And also, besides getting away from Barca and Real Madrid, not to make this too Barca and Messi, Barca and Real Madrid and Messi and Ronaldo centric, but also the fact that we saw fantastic teams like Bayern in 2013 win a treble, and we saw great underdog stories or great games or great underdog stories in a way, like Chelsea in 2012 winning the UCL, beating Bayern in their stadium. We saw Bayern Munich actually win 2 trebles also in 2019, even though that also extended to the 2020 season, but it started in 2019. We saw Inter win a treble in 2010. We saw Juventus and Atletico Madrid. Those two teams made Champions League finals in 4 straight years. 2013 Atletico Madrid, 2014 Atletico Madrid, 2015 Juventus, 2016 Atletico Madrid, 2017 Juventus. Two teams that people didn't really consider heavyweights that much. I mean, Juve is obviously a heavyweight, Atletico Madrid somewhat so, but still the fact that those two teams continuously got the UCL finals is amazing. Because they had great philosophies around them, and they had great defensive teams, and the fact that they could they beat big boys on their way there. I mean, I remember Atletico Madrid in 2016 beat Pep Guardiola's Bayern Munich to get to the UCL final. Fucking Juventus in 2017 had a fantastic UCL run as well. And then we also saw teams like sorry, oh my god, what the fuck happened there? We also saw great teams like those Liverpool teams in 2019 who made the UCL final. And we also saw Spurs get to a UCL final. I mean, all this shit happened in the 2010s. So to me, and also we saw, not to mention, apart from Messi and Ronaldo, we saw guys like Neymar, like Frank Ribery, like Andres Iniesta, like Arjen Robben, like Xavi, like Sergio Ramos, like Marcelo, like Dani Alves, like Piqué, like, I don't know, Aiden Hazard, who was a fucking phenom, Kevin De Bruyne, obviously in the 2010s, Thomas Muller, Robert Lewandowski, all these great, Manuel Neuer, who's the greatest keeper of all time in my opinion, Oblak, Casillas, I mean, all these generational talents who just played in the 2010s. I mean, to me, it's the greatest collection of football players and football teams of all time. So obviously, again, I'm going to be biased because I was a Barca fan in the mid to late 2000s, because I became a Barca fan really in 2007, my first game that I ever watched. I just became in love with the club, but I was a Barca fan. But I'm sure most of you guys can agree with this. When you first get into football, you're a fan of your club, of your specific team. And then as you start learning more about the sport, you become enamored with the sport. And now I love my club, obviously. Like, I root for Barca. That's my team. But I'm also a lover of football. I mean, I just love the sport as a whole. So obviously, I'm going to have a little more like heart-shaped glasses, is that what it says? Or hard-colored glasses towards that era, because obviously, like I said, I grew up in that. But you could also argue the 2000s. I mean, some people who are 2000s babies, they would argue the 2000s because we saw great players like Zinedine Zidane and R9 and Ronaldinho and Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard and Scholes and Ferdinand and Terry and Rooney and all these great English players. And also the fact that we saw great underdog stories like Liverpool winning the UCL final in 2005, beating AC Milan, who had a much better team than them. I mean, that's those starting 11 comparisons aren't even fucking close. And they won that game, coming back 3-3 in the greatest UCL final of all time. We also saw Greece win the Euros. You know what I mean? Fucking Greece. We saw Porto win a UCL with Jose Mourinho and almost win a treble. Greece won the Euros. I cannot believe I just said that. Greece actually won the Euros. You know, all that shit happened in the 2000s. We also saw great international tournaments like the 2006 World Cup, which many people argue has the single greatest game in the history of football in that tournament, which is the final. I mean, that final was ridiculous. So many storylines. The fact that was R9's last game, not R9, sorry, Zinedine Zidane's last game. Oh, also, we saw Henry. I don't know if I mentioned him in the 2000s. I mean, we saw the Arsenal Invincibles. We saw great teams and dominant teams like Sir Alex Ferguson's Manchester United teams. And we also saw fantastic teams like fucking Jose Mourinho's 2015, the 2005, 2006 teams that only conceded 15 goals in 2005 and won back-to-back Premier Leagues. Oh, and I forgot to mention, sorry, I'm going, but you guys know how this shit works. My brain is going at 1,000 miles per hour. I just love talking about football. I'm sorry. But in 2016, Leicester City winning a Premier League in the 2010s, I mean, that's pretty fucking iconic. The fact that Leicester City, who had, I think, like 10,000 to 1 odds or something crazy like that to win a Premier League, the fact that they went on to win the whole thing. I mean, Claudio Ranieri, Jamie Vardy, Riyad Mahrez, Danny Drinkwater, Robert Huth, I mean, Wes Morgan, all these different players that went on to win that title and became like just cemented in the history of football. So obviously, to go back to the 2000s, I mean, the 2000s you could also argue has a great decade of football, but I think that the game evolved and it became more fun in the 2010s. Now, that's just my opinion. People could say that the game right now is too flashy and too many players are diving, and also the game has become a lot more about systems nowadays. It's less about individual quality and players, and it's more about like the system that the team employs. As we see with obviously Pep Guardiola and Man City, who have great players, but that team is like bun to a halt. Pep Guardiola's Barca teams were never like that. Pep Guardiola's Barca teams were very, like, it was very structured, but it also required a lot of individual brilliance. And nowadays with Man City, it's less more about that. I mean, it's just a system that they follow. And also because the game is lacking players like an Eden Hazard, or like a Messi, or like a Ronaldo, or like a Neymar. Players who could just, like, you know, you give them the ball and they do something, bro. They do something. I mean, you could give Messi the ball in the halfway line and he doesn't need instructions from anybody. He's going to make something happen. The same thing with Neymar, the same thing with Ronaldo. Nowadays, you have fantastic players like Erling Haaland, but they're more like specialists. You know, he's a great goal scorer. You know what I'm saying? But Erling Haaland's a fantastic player, but he's not the type of guy who's going to get the ball in the halfway line, dribble through 10 players, and then score a banger. You guys comprehend what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to sound like a dick or like I'm criticizing Haaland because I think he's a great player, one of the best players in the world right now, but he's more of a specialist. Back in the day, the game didn't have many specialists. It was more like do-it-all guys. Thierry Henry could dribble past 10 players. He could also assist and he could also finish. He could do it all. You know what I mean? Same with Zinedine Zidane. But again, I think football in general has had a golden period. I mean, I think football has had many golden periods. Obviously, when you look, every decade almost has had a golden period with great players and great teams. Like the 60s had guys like Pelé and Garrincha and Bobby Charlton and George Best and obviously Eusebio and those Brazil teams that won a World Cup and those Benfica teams that made UCL finals and those Inter teams that won UCLs and those Milan teams that won UCLs in the 60s. And of course, those Benfica teams with Eusebio who made UCL finals. Did I already mention that? I already mentioned Eusebio. And those Man United teams, with Bobby Charlton and George Best that also made UCL finals. Then in the 70s, you had Johan Cruyff and Ajax who won 3 straight UCLs, and Beckenbauer and Gerd Müller with Bayern Munich who also won 3 straight UCLs. In the 80s, we know Maradona, Platini, Van Basten. I mean, we know who these guys are, amazing players. And then obviously in the 90s, you had guys like Romario and Rivaldo, and you know, a bunch of different great players as well, and great teams like also like those Brazil teams and those French teams in the 90s, obviously internationally. And then you had those Milan teams as well in the 90s who were great. And then obviously, like I said, the 2000s and the 2010s who just had like, to me, like I said, the 2010s is the best, but I think the 2000s on to now, like to 2020, was the best era of football, the most nostalgic and the most beautiful era of football of all time, because we saw a great mix of individual talent and great crop of players who came up, and also great individual teams. But again, that's just my personal opinion. I'd love to know what you guys think. What do you think is the greatest era of football of all time? Like I said, I'm obviously going to be biased towards my era or my decade because I grew up watching that. And I think that when we look back in time and we see that the fact that Messi and Ronaldo had this rivalry for so long, and the fact that Real Madrid and Barcelona were so dominant and so good, and they had at one point the FIFA Pro 11 consisted of players. 10 out of the 11 were part of two teams in one league. People could say that that's also bad because it proves that the game was just like centered around one league. But I think when you have that level of greatness, bro, I mean, that is amazing. Now, people obviously might also say, but you're looking only at La Liga. Like, oh, sorry, I hit my mic. Holy fuck. You're only looking at La Liga, obviously. Like, the rest of the leagues weren't as great or whatever. But I don't think that's true. I mean, Borussia Dortmund had great teams in the 2010s. Bayern Munich, like I mentioned. The only league that kind of fell off in the 2010s was Serie A. But they were also really dominant in the 2000s as well. I mean, Serie A was the most dominant league probably in the 2000s, along with probably La Liga. But I think the Serie A fell off a little bit because obviously the only great team I think the only team in Serie A that made a UCL final in the 2010s was Inter. And obviously they won the UCL final and ended up winning a treble. But I think that Inter team can carry the whole Serie A because that team won a treble and they were actually so fucking good. And also in the Premier League, I mean, we had those Man United teams with Sir Alex Ferguson. And we had, again, like those Liverpool teams like I mentioned, even those Man City teams. And again, even Spurs, like I said, made a UCL final. So again, to me, I think that the 2010s had the greatest combination of fantastic individual players and also great teams, as well as the 2000s. The 2000s also had the added factor of great underdog stories like Greece and Porto and Liverpool winning UCLs and Euros. But also the 2010s, like I mentioned, had Leicester City. But I'm rambling on too much right now. This video is already long enough as it is. I don't even know what the fuck the structure of this video was. But again, guys, I just look at a question, I turn on the camera, and I kind of just talk. I hope you guys enjoy this video, man. Thank you so much for watching. I love every single one of you. And yeah, I posted something on my community thread that if you guys want to leave me some football hot takes, because I'm going to make a video about that. So if you want to check that out and leave me some hot takes on there, I'll be making a video about that probably next week. So hope you guys can leave me some suggestions there. And yeah, man, love you guys. Thank you for watching. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace out.